In what ways does deep-sea mining constitute a neo-colonial project? This is the question that I want to discuss over the next 10 minutes. To start with an original colonial project, we can turn to Captain James Cook, who designated Australia as terra nullius, or nobody's land, and claimed it for the British Empire. I suggest that the maritime mining and exploration of today continues this colonising project, in which an emboldened subject extends their power to ever new, apparently empty frontiers. So, what is deep-sea mining? This involves using machines to extract valuable resources from the bottom of the ocean. While this also includes oil, I'm focusing here on mining for metals. Proponents of deep-sea mining claim that to wean ourselves off fossil fuels, we will need to produce vast amounts of technology for the harnessing and storage of green energy. This will require millions of tons of valuable metals, and given that land-based deposits are being so rapidly depleted, accessing these metals will require mining the oceans. Deep-sea mining companies are interested in copper, nickel, manganese, and cobalt. And while they couch this interest in a rhetoric of innovation, they're really working under the guise of sustainability to reproduce exactly the same unviable conditions we have at present. One of the first ever deep-sea mining operations was undertaken in 1974 by reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes. Hughes decided to build a ship that would be capable of mining manganese from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Given Hughes's reputation, others followed his intuition. Mining companies became interested, and soon US universities started offering deep-sea mining courses. In reality, however, Hughes was working for the CIA, and the real purpose of the expedition was to retrieve a Russian submarine. Even though the mining operation was fake, it started a genuine interest in deep-sea mining, and even got UN diplomats to start negotiating future rights to ocean minerals. The primary result of that negotiation was the creation of the Law of the Sea Treaty, which deemed resources in international waters to be the common heritage of mankind. Under this principle, much of the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, the most resource-rich region of the ocean floor, has now been allocated to various developing island nations.
The ocean is the next frontier for mining, and Nauru is part of a pioneering venture that could soon power the world's green economy. The government of Nauru is sponsoring Nauru Ocean Resources Inc. to harvest metal-rich nodules found on the ocean's floor. Nauru is a subsidiary of Deep Green Metals.
This is the new oil. Our nodules are filled with nickel and cobalt and manganese and copper, and they're the metals that we need to build electric vehicle batteries, to build renewable energy storage, to build electricity generating windmills and solar panels. At Deep Green, we call them metals for our future.
As deep-sea mining has recently taken off, Gerard Barron of Deep Green has swiftly become the leading figure in the industry. He loves holding rocks. As of 2018, Deep Green acquired the rights to the mining capacities of 3 different island nations: Nauru, Tonga, and Kiribati. What this means is that Deep Green now controls how these countries access their resources. The companies that each country sets up to handle the mining are now subsidiaries of Deep Green Metals. These nations are now beholden to Barron and his mineral monopoly. But things start to get even weirder when Bjarke Ingels enters the picture. So, for those who don't know, Bjarke Ingels is one of the world's most famous contemporary architects, and interestingly enough, he's also very chummy with our man, Gerard Barron. What the two share is an ambition to conquer the seas, and for Bjarke, this means developing floating cities.
And even if the first one is designed for the tropics, we also imagine that the architecture can adapt to any culture.
What we have here is a partial lineage of frontierists, men who have engaged in maritime conquest in the name of the greater good. And for Bjarke and Baron, this project is still ongoing. So when I saw that they were both speaking at a CogX panel together, I knew I had to attend.
And the one thing that really excites me is floating cities, because we will have hundreds and then thousands of people working on these production platforms.
When I watched their talk, even if they were being incredibly opaque about it, I got the impression that not only were they actively working together, but that their project seemed to be more developed than they were letting on. And this suspicion of mine was proven to be well-founded when I found a video of someone claiming to be working on a unique offshore project in the tropics. From this video, I was able to extract some metadata that eventually gave me a latitude and longitude. With this, I started to scour satellite images in the vicinity of this location, before finally finding the patch of sea where Oceanic City was being built. We can see here that what currently stands was built between mid-2018 and mid-2019. But I still had so many questions. Who was building this project? Where were they coming from? And who was funding the whole thing? Going back to the video, I realised the clues were already there. Logging the ship ID number into marine traffic, I found out that this particular ship was frequently docking at the port of Manzanillo in Mexico. More satellite trawling ensued, and eventually I stumbled upon a site that resembled the workers' quarters shown in a series of videos shared with me by a Mexican journalist. On this issue of labour conditions, I combed through some corporate databases and saw that Deep Green have recently employed multiple ex-judges to oversee their affairs. And this is where the research gets into speculation. But since operating beyond national boundaries can mean a reduction in tax and also labour regulations, I suspect that Deep Green enlisted all of this legal assistance in order to really exploit these factors. Looking at what the repercussions might be of a project like this, I think it's useful to consider who the shareholders are in the Oceanics company. Aside from the likes of Steve Bannon and Jair Bolsonaro, you also have companies like Rio Tinto as well as Lockheed Martin, who operate Australia's detention centres on Nauru. Finally, we can look at the ecological impact. And while most of the impact that this living and mining project will have on deep sea life remains completely unknown, what's guaranteed is that the disruption these machines will cause to local whale populations will be enormous. These charts were produced by a researcher who made them by extrapolating data gathered on the changing vocalizations of sperm whales near Hawaii. You can see how the song of the whales near Oceanics are expected to be completely morphed after only 1 year. Back to the painting of Cook. Made in 1865, we see the colonising event of 1770. But the scene is adorned with Union Jack flags, which didn't exist until 1801. Whether or not this anachronism was intentional, it has the effect of retroactively imbuing Cook's claim of sovereignty with the symbol of a unified Britain, and therefore bolstering the British claim to the territory of Australia. Like the painting, my presentation has contained several fictitious elements, but this was done for a very specific purpose. If the hoax has often been used to reinforce hegemonic and colonial powers, here I've tried to co-opt the hoax and use it to counter such powers. By conflating the real but nascent Oceanic City with widespread conditions of oppression and persecution that are happening as we speak, I wanted to show that we can't afford to let current conditions be extrapolated into the future that these men are on the cusp of bringing about. They claim to be enacting innovative, sustainable futures, while in reality reaffirming the status quo. They discuss the world-changing capacities of architecture, its ability to realise the formerly unimaginable, and yet they can't conceive of a world that doesn't rely on extraction or on cars.